With YouTube attacking alternative media, please consider supporting the channel via Patreon for just $1 per month. Link below. First things first, Quentin Tarantino obviously is a big thing right now. You know, he's coming into his ninth movie, I think is what this one is, his ninth film, and it's going to be going over to Sony. First time he's left Harvey Weinstein's teat in a long time. I mean, arguably, understandably, as to why, but because of that controversy surrounding Harvey Weinstein and more importantly, Uma Thurman on the set of Kill Bill, we come across this story where Sony is reportedly having second thoughts on Tarantino's new film. And this is not where Tarantino wants to be. Now, just to be clear, if something does go tits up with this particular film, he'll go and find a distributor elsewhere, but the budget may take a hit. This is one that I do think he got $100 million for through Sony or something along those lines, and they very much want to work with them. But if they're reconsidering how they want to approach this because of the whole Me Too movement, it's going to be interesting if that happens, because I think it will really alienate a lot of Tarantino fans from being sympathetic to the overall movement. Now, it says here, Tarantino has been having a lot of bad time in the press lately, with the filmmaker coming under fire for his involvement in a driving stunt mishap on the set of Kill Bill, which left actress Uma Thurman injured, as well as the resurfacing of a 2003 Howard Stern interview where he offered some controversial comments on the Roman Polanski rape case. And yeah, those are pretty controversial. That entire story in and of itself is extremely controversial, and there are many people out there that have many different takes on it. I would recommend, if you are unfamiliar with a lot of that or only know like the base story, go and look into it a little bit more. It doesn't make it any better. It doesn't alleviate or absolve Polanski of his crimes, but it gives you a solid understanding of maybe why people in Hollywood have kind of rallied behind him. There's more there than the general public knows, and that's kind of what Tarantino was talking about, in my opinion. Again, I'm not saying his comments are good. I'm just saying like there's a certain level of context that people in the industry have versus those that are just kind of from the peanut gallery, which I think is one of the things that really causes for a lot of miscommunication these days. Now, it says, according to Showbiz 411, the bad publicity surrounding Tarantino has resulted in Sony Pictures having second thoughts about his new movie, set to the backdrop of the Manson Family Murders in 1969, of which Polanski's wife Sharon Tate was one of the victims. Now, yeah, that makes sense. That totally makes sense as to why that would be one of those things that they would want to maybe distance themselves from, where he came out and was all like, it wasn't really rape. I mean, like, you know, she was into it. That whole thing. My Tarantino is terrible, but given that happened and he wants to talk about this from the Sharon Tate, murder perspective or the Manson Family murder perspective. But one thing you have to understand, though, is like those two incidences didn't happen like immediately following one another, right? Like Polanski, his wife was pregnant at the time when Sharon Tate died. She was with child, and that threw him into a very dark place. And I'm not saying it excuses anything that he did in regards to that 13-year-old girl, but it gives you kind of like a setup for events in terms of leading down that dark path. Whereas if she hadn't been killed, if the Manson Family Murders hadn't happened, that 13-year-old Roman Polanski would have never been in a hot tub at Jack Nicholson's house. So you can kind of see that there's like a chain of events here that kind of leads to the situation. Now, I don't know if this particular film is going to even remotely touch upon that. I don't think that it would, given the controversial nature of it, but that, of course, is being used as a bad publicity thing against Tarantino. Now, the site claims that the project is now in serious jeopardy and may not get made at all, although there is always the prospect of Tarantino taking it to another studio or finding independent financing. That being said, with the budget reportedly in excess of $100 million and the subject matter controversial, it may not be too easy to raise the necessary fundings. As if Django Unchained was not controversial. I mean, like, there were so many people that were like trying to rally against that movie, even though most people genuinely liked it. And I'd go as far as to say genuinely loved it. So him being controversial as a filmmaker is nothing new, right? Nothing new at all. So, taking place in Los Angeles during the summer of 1969, the as-yet untitled film is set to star Leonardo DiCaprio as the former star of a hit Western show who is now looking to revive his career by moving into movies. A host of actors have also been linked to the project, including Tom Cruise, Brad Pitt, Margot Robbie, and Samuel L. Jackson. And the thing is, if there's a lot of heat on this movie, Cruise, Pitt, Robbie, probably not Jackson because he's worked with Tarantino multiple times, but Cruise, Pitt, and Robbie probably will, in fact, bail out. And that's unfortunate. That's unfortunate that this is kind of where things have gone to. Now, some have argued that his situation involving Uma Thurman and the Kill Bill stunt situation is, you know, like, that's another factor in here as well. Because if you look at the crash footage, you know, like there was a lot that went wrong. I'd say everything went wrong, and Tarantino himself has apologized for that. Uma Thurman has accepted his apology for that, and she acknowledges that. I find it interesting that that particular bit of information came out at the same time as her accusations against Harvey Weinstein. You know, one of those, it kind of felt weird to conflate those two together, but at the same time, you can understand, you know, why, right? And so Tarantino, I don't think will have a problem going to another studio. And Sony may actually at this point be willing to pull the plug simply because they've had a run of good luck lately with Jumanji coming out over $800 million, Spider-Man doing quite well, Baby Driver doing quite well. Sony's actually looking okay, even though they acknowledge that they have to change in order or innovate in order to stay in the game. They've still done enough to kind of keep themselves above board, and they may not want to look at this Tarantino movie that has a budget of in excess of $100 million, probably because they may think that due to the subject matter, given the climate right now, it won't make that kind of money. If you want my honest opinion, Sony could use this actually as a bargaining chip to lower the budget, to slash the budget down. Like, look, we're not going to give you $100 million. If you want to make this movie, we'll give you 50 or something, or 60 or something. They're going to try to bargain to cut the price down in order to save them on the back end in case this film is a flop, but at the same time, not want to possibly walk away from the opportunity of winning several Academy Awards while being the studio that produced and distributed the film, because that's another part of it too. Sony hasn't had a, you know, even with Sony Pictures Classics, hasn't really done much that's gotten them in you know, awards, and that the accolades are what everybody wants, right? And so Sony, I think to prove their value as a studio, would still want to go for the award circuit. So walking away from a Tarantino movie just seems to well, seem kind of dumb in that particular regard, at least to me. But we'll have to wait and see what happens. I think things are going to be okay, but they're going to use this as a bargaining chip in order to see if they can get themselves a better deal. And now the question really going to boil down to Tarantino's ego. Will Tarantino actually sit there and take the L in terms of budget in order to see his work completed? And I honestly cannot say if he will. His ego is pretty notorious throughout Hollywood, so we'll just have to wait and see what happens.